Hello and welcome to Make the Logo Bigger. My name is Brenton. This podcast is your gateway into the world of advertising production, crafted especially for those who are stepping in new, aiming to become producers, or simply eager to understand the inner workings of advertising and marketing. We're here to share insights and knowledge you've been looking for, with stories, tips, and real conversations from the pros. We're simplifying the process for everyone with a production curiosity. Whether you're just starting out or keen to explore the production side of ads, you've found the right place. Let's jump in. Today's guest is Nick Jamieson, a former executive creative director at Taboo Group and most recently at Scooter in Melbourne. While Nick's path didn't follow the traditional route to Australia's big agencies, his journey is nevertheless marked by creativity, resilience, individuality, and a fearless approach to new challenges. From comedy and acting to creative writing, Nick's diverse background has given him a unique edge in the advertising world. His leadership at both Taboo and Scooter has shaped campaigns that push the boundaries by blending creativity with practical problem solving. Throughout his career, Nick has shared valuable insights on the importance of collaboration, the need for fearlessness in the creative process, and how great ideas often emerge from unexpected places. He emphasises the role of mentorship, learning from every interaction, and the importance of staying open to new perspectives. Nick Jamieson. Nick Jamieson, a pleasure to have you on. Super grateful for you giving up your time and being willing to share your thoughts and adventures. In fact, I'm actually just super grateful that anybody would come on and want to talk with me, so I appreciate it. To kick it off, Nick, as always, give us a bit of background about yourself, how you started out in the industry, and to where you are today.
Great. I'll try and do that. But firstly, mate, thank you for having me. I'm grateful for the invitation. Honestly, mate, I really appreciate it. So thank you, and you're doing a really great job on it, by the way.
Thanks. Thank you.
That's right. No worries, mate. And I've been thinking about this. I guess my experience is pretty varied and not, I guess, a non-traditional kind of road map to where I am now in terms of, I guess, and what a traditional would be study advertising. Always wanted to be in advertising. Went to uni to do it, came out, did awards, that kind of path. Mm-hmm. There is no right or wrong, but that wasn't mine. I kind of went a bunch of different ways, and I guess it started. It's always been a creative experience, I guess, that's relevant to get to where I am now. Yep. But it was sort of the love of wanting to be an actor was probably where it began. So coming out of drama was pretty much the only thing I did well at school. I was pretty shit at school, from a kind of an academic point of view. And so when I left, I fumbled around with a bunch of uni courses that weren't really fit for me. But while I was studying those various courses, one was a Bachelor of Arts, pretty straightforward. And then I think hospitality management at RMIT, because I screwed up my preferences on my HSC, which you had to do when you fill your preferences out before you get your HSC, like New South Wales, where I went to school. And I forgot to change them once and I fucked around with them. I put medicine and stuff that I was never going to get into, animal husbandry and stuff, because I thought it was funny. And I remember my dad, my brothers called me because all my family was in Melbourne, and I finished school in Sydney. My dad called me and he was devastated. He was very ashamed that I didn't get into any unis, because there was no way I was going to get into the ones that my joke preference list. But then my brothers called me and they had looked and gone, "Do you know how lucky you are?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You've gotten into hospitality management at William Angliss Institute of TAFE." I'll put it to you this now. There was no way that hospitality management was going to be the dream career for me. I was just lucky that I got into a course. So I packed up and went to Melbourne. And anyway, there begins, in between that, my brother did a lot of stand-up comedy. He was a comedian for a while. But he also had a design agency on the side. And one of the comedy venues here in Melbourne, the Comics Lounge, was a client. He designed my brother designed the logo, but also worked there as a comedian. And he got me a gig working behind the bar there at the Comics Lounge. And I also then found myself as become part of an improv comedy show that was run every Sunday night. And I ended up doing that every Sunday for what was called Improv Sunday for about 2 years, maybe longer, 2 or 3 years. And with some really great comedians, Charlie Pickering, Cam Knight, Madeline West from Neighbours was part of the crew, and some other great comedians. And we kind of took that from just the Sunday to, I think we were doing 2 nights a week. We toured it to the Fringe Festival. We did comedy festivals, and we'd interchange. We always had the main cast, which was about a handful of us, and then we'd have our guests that would come in, and especially during the comedy festival. Like Jim Owen dropped in one time and did some improv with us, and it was really great. And I went down that path. I very quickly gave up the studying to be a hospitality management expert, and just kind of put everything into the acting and the comedy. That was what I did for a living. Didn't make a lot of money from it, but I loved it and enjoyed it. I auditioned for the Victorian College of the Arts and got in. Fortunately got in. Spent the next 3 years deep in the acting world for 3. It's a 9 to 6 pretty much, especially when, as you're sort of you're all in, and it's everything that you live and breathe it for 3 years. So I've got spat out, and then got working, and I was very quickly kind of going. I had a partner, and we got married, and we had our first kid, and this was kind of like this is what I wanted out of life, and I wanted to have a family and start a family and do all that kind of stuff, and the acting gig was it's tough going, as we talked about before we jumped on. It's very hard to make a consistent living. So I was like, okay, what do I do next? How can I find something that's consistent, that's going to pay with the skills that I have, which I didn't have I had an acting degree, but I didn't have was accounting or business or anything like that. So both my brothers had design / creative agencies. So my brother started one called Christian, my brother, called Marilyn and Sons, and he'd worked in media, and he's an industrial designer by trade, or by that's what he studied to do, and was doing that, and then started his own agency. My other brother has a design agency called Grin Creative. So they were good sounding boards for potential careers in commercial creativity, let's call it that, right? And Christian got me a gig because I was like, I can write. That's probably the one thing that I can do naturally that didn't need, I could do it. And there was an agency called Life Lounge, which it's no longer around. It was a creative agency, but also a youth culture publication. So I started my writing career. I guess this is where the closer a link to advertising was journalism. I was lucky to be given a gig to do writing. So I was interviewing, musicians or bands or film directors or whatever, and writing editorial pieces. I then moved into an editor role of sub-editor or editor. And then eventually after that, I moved over to lifelounge.com, and I became the editor-in-chief of lifelounge.com. And then I finished up there, and then was like, what's next? I was like, copywriting, I think, is probably the next, again, suggestion from my brothers. Were like, why don't you start freelancing as a copywriter? No experience. But I just started getting some bits and pieces at different agencies, just little contract gigs and bits and pieces. Landed my first full-time role at DT, at Visual Identity, VI, in a digital agency in Albert Park as a copywriter. And that was my first sort of full-time gig. And then I got made redundant from VI because they lost a client, unfortunately. But that was a shame. And then was stuck in the same position again. I had a kid, had no money, had no job, and auditioned for MasterChef because I can cook. Because I was like, and it was one of those things when it's like, well, you should go on MasterChef. You're a good cook. It's great. And I'm like, well. Then I found myself in a position of shit. Maybe I should, again, drawing on something that I was like, how do I make a living out of something? Cooking, maybe. And at the same time, I auditioned. I actually said no when I did the written application, and I didn't go. I got accepted from the written application. Then you do the big cattle call where you go in and you cook it like Box Hill Tape or whatever. And then and I said no because there was a job going at Clem's at the marketing shop that I put my hat in for. Had the ring for, and then MasterChef came back and said, we reserve some spaces for people who miss the audition who we think would be great on the show. Can we come to your house and you can do your cooking? So they came over with a crew while my wife and my baby daughter was sitting on her knee in the kitchen, and they brought the mystery box challenge, just shot it on a phone. And I did my audition at home in my own kitchen. I actually turned down after I heard when they give you the rundown of what to expect to going into the show. But fortunately, I got the job at Clem's at the marketing shop. It was a freelance to go perm gig as a senior copywriter at the marketing shop. So it was their shopper marketing BTL agency as part of the Clem's group. And then I was tapped on the shoulder by the great people at Taboo. They were looking for a creative director, and the guys actually who I'd worked with at Clem's had moved over. A crew of them had moved over to start the Monkeys Melbourne, and they were underneath Taboo. And I think Ant Keogh sort of said to Jimmy, "Oh, you probably should have a chat to Jamo. He's all right." So he did that. He slid into my LinkedIn DMs, and I was ready to leave. So I jumped over to Taboo, a really exciting agency with a really exciting proposition, non-traditional, no strict answer to any brief. Actually, no answer to any brief was ever the same. Anyway, so that was 5 years, and then it was time to go for me from there, and then another opportunity. I was ready to actually just to jump ship and sort of throw caution into the wind, and then a job came across my desk, and it was for an agency called Scooter, relatively unknown agency. We're in growth. What they wanted to do, big part of the job initially was to rebrand the agency, do a full repositioning, and the idea of working on an agency in that capacity is something I'd never done. It's something I thought would be a really interesting skill to learn or experience to have. That probably brings us up to speed, mate.
Going back to what you said about rebranding an agency, give us an idea of what it's like when you're sitting there and you are repositioning and rebranding. What are you thinking? What are you trying to do to set yourself apart and not sound like a cliche or come across as something that people don't understand?
Look, it is where you're sitting there, and first of all, because none of us had ever done it before, everyone working in the team, really, you've just got to do your research first and really get an understanding of who you are, where you've been as a place, and kind of start to understand and work out what that story is. What does the future look like for the agency? What are we going to be in 2 years based on what we're good at? Because you can't, we kept coming back to, everyone says we're a full service agency. We are an we are full service is kind of, I think, the sort of, like the go-to word to try and say that you do everything.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult. There's not many agencies that can do everything equally well.
Yeah.
We kept coming back to full service because I still believe that we did do a full service. We did design, we did brand, and we ended up with this model around an integrated brand agency was where we landed with it. We could build you a brand experience. We could come up with an idea for an activation, or a real world thing. We can build a web, so not that we, again, going back to what I said about it's not easy to do everything well, because that is, and nor could we. We'd have to find the right people. But I think that's as well, you find the experts and you bring them in to make sure that if you say you can build your if we're going to build your website, well, none of us really were expert in web development, but we'll find people to do it.
So you didn't go the traditional route. You didn't dream about becoming working in advertising. I would assume you probably didn't sit there during your younger years and watched commercials and went, "Wow, this is how this is done." And again, we've all seen great commercials, but what the point that I'm trying to get to, you start in journalism, you're writing there. What was the biggest surprise for you when you started copywriting and doing paid advertising? When I started
working in ads.
In ads. When you started, what was the biggest surprise for you?
The biggest surprise for me, I think, was taking the writing. It was adapting and having to change and learn very quickly that, I was used to writing 500,000 word pieces to then go. And I wouldn't say it's a surprise. Let's call it surprise challenge. I mean, surprise was just like working in a completely different environment and a different process. Because everything was a surprise to a degree, because I'd never thought about working in an agency, therefore hadn't had conversations around what it could be like working in an agency, a creative agency environment. The only experience I had was because my brother had an agency, but even then it wasn't enough for me not to be surprised when I went in there, like how the process works. From a writing point of view, it was a challenge to then go, I had to basically chop everything down and start writing to make a headline fit on something, or a strapline for something, or you cut it right down. I didn't have the luxury to waffle on about Falls Festival because I went there and watched a bunch of bands and could write 1,000 words on that, or interviewing a film director, just adapting my writing to suit advertising, having to very quickly learn, because I hadn't learned. Didn't go to award school, so I kind of just had to take a punt at it. But to answer your question about, so lots of surprises there. The biggest surprise is probably the amount of surprises and how very quickly I had to learn. I was terrified when I first started at Clem's, because at the marketing shop, I didn't know anything about below the line advertising. I used to shit my dads whenever the boss would come around. He'd have a little list too of like things that he wanted to check off and check in on, and I was like, you could see him coming with a list. I was like, oh God, I don't know, what am I doing? Beads of sweat off and just hope that I was in the ballpark. But I guess it proved that I was pretty good at learning things quite quickly and being quite adaptable to it.
And what about mentors? It's two parts, actually. Mentors, but then who are people that you looked at and went, Jesus, they are good at what they do. They've just got it.
I was fortunate enough. The boss of the marketing shop was like, I should get you a mentor, connected with a mentor in the building. And it was Ant Keogh. And he was like, but I had no idea who he was because I didn't know anything about advertising. And I was just like, he mentioned Ant Keogh, and I remember going to my brother going like, oh, so I've got a mentor, like my mentor, Ant Keogh, and his jaw nearly hit the ground. He was like, what? And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, mate, he's one of like the all-time greats. And I was like, okay, great. So I was like, amazing. And it was a very funny mentor, if you've ever met Ant. Lovely, hilarious, obviously very talented, amazing, creative. But I would come to the sessions, and we'd have one maybe every fortnight, and I'd come with like a little notepad, expecting to just be gifted the answers to advertising, and it would end up just being a chat. And that was, for me, that was the best kind of. I would ask a few questions, but it would really just be a conversation. And I very quickly didn't bring a notepad to the sessions anymore, but it was more of a mentorship in the sense of a connection with somebody who knew what he was doing, and I would ask questions more in a conversational way during our sessions. Sometimes it would be half an hour, sometimes it would be a bit longer. But he certainly showed me a way to think about being creative. I mean, he might not even remember them, but I was very quickly learned that this guy was what he said. You could take things from, and being able to watch him operate in a room or talk about the work, and seeing him in action and being around him, and that helped me become ingratiated more with the rest of the agency and the core Clemenger creative team, because I got access to that. But Evan Roberts, I think, who's now over at TBWA in Sydney, I got to work with him on a few really great campaigns. So I think the mentoring and that happened through the work, through being able to be, because we'd come together for a Carlton Dry campaign where they would come up with the platform or the camp sort of core idea, and then we would have to activate it in store and bring that through. So there was a real collaboration there in terms of the integration. So I got to, when we would have check-ins or whatever, get to see other people at work, which was really how I learnt, was just by watching and asking questions and absorbing these great people or these great creatives.
And now, you being an ECD yourself, how would you synthesize what is creativity? What is it that you do?
I think it's a combination of imagination and play. Kids are the most creative, as they say. Kids, their imaginations are at their best. I think it's a combination of curiosity, imagination, and fearlessness would be what creativity is, because creativity can be applied to everything if you put it like that. Two, if you take that idea of imagination, fearlessness, and curiosity and you apply it to the context of advertising, I think it's using those three to solve a problem or capitalize an opportunity, and then you add the commercial side to that. So, because there always is a commerciality to it in the advertising game, we have to sell more beer, we have to get more people to buy this, to eat that, to paint that, to whatever it is, in order to generate revenue for the business. So you then go, let's use our imagination and use our curiosity and use our fearlessness to creatively solve that problem.
Well, then let's pull that apart just a little bit further, just quickly. Fearlessness.
Yep.
Is fearlessness the ability to not censor or filter whatever comes through?
You you're lucky if you get to a great idea straight away, and you often have to get through bad ideas to get to a good idea. And then that means you have to be willing to acknowledge that not everything's going to be great and that you're going to sound stupid at times. But that's okay. The fearlessness to feel safe in an environment that you can share ideas, be it good or bad. So I think, fearlessness in just coming to the party with an open and judgment-free state of mind.
And when that fearlessness is embodied by everybody within the group and you're coming up with ideas, when you do come up with the idea that is an absolute winner, does everybody know? Is there any kind of feeling within the tummy?
Feeling, yeah, it is. And I think that comes with experience of just knowing, and that's your intuition. You go, there might even be just 3 words or it might just be written down in a couple of sentences what the idea, but you know that there's something that has potential to be something. So I think in the early stages, that is part of your job as a creative director or an ECD, is to spot those moments or spot that potential in the team's idea. Again, in those early stages, you put everything up on the wall, on the floor, on the computer, on the Fig Jam board, whatever it is, and then you have a look at it. That's why literally there is no bad idea, because every idea is good in the way that it gets you closer to what the right idea is.
And so if you look at somebody, and we've been talking about Ant, and I think he's very well regarded. I know he's extremely well regarded in this country. So if you're a company and you're like, what are we paying for? You're paying for the ability for someone to look and go, that works, that doesn't, that's right, we're on the money here.
Clients probably don't always truly understand how it really works. They're looking for their agency to solve their problems in a creative way, not necessarily knowing that there's good intuition. I think that intuition probably translated more to trust. They trust that Nick is leading, or whoever is Ant, Nick, or whoever is going to lead a team to come up with an idea.
All right, Nick, well, let's talk about creative process.
Yes.
When you've got a new campaign that comes through, how do you like to go about the creative ideation? What's your take and what's your way of doing it?
So what I found is, firstly, I like to be really collaborative with everybody on the project team. So be that account service, strategy, the creatives, everyone. So I find sometimes at Taboo especially, and even I try to sometimes do it, I did it at Scooter as well, when we would not take the client brief but get the creative brief and brief the team, the briefing session would very quickly become a brainstorm. Because then because I would have read the brief, so I'd always quite quickly come to sort of some thought starters in the room. And that's a really lovely way to get the process started, because then everybody can sort of be part, because, ideas, the beginning of an idea can come from anybody, really, if they've got an interesting input, because you're all involved in the brief. So it probably starts the process for me, and hopefully sometimes the team, not always, but it starts in the briefing when we give everyone the rundown. And usually maybe there's a half an hour afterwards where we just have a bit of a jam and go, oh, that reminds me of this, or that's cool, that's interesting, that little bit there. The next part is to obviously go away with the creatives and kind of just have a bit more of a chat with just the creative team working on it, to just answer any questions, see if there's any more information that we need from the client, any more little tidbits, and just load up on as much relevant information or load down on any irrelevant stuff. So sometimes briefs can have a lot of misinformation in there that isn't necessarily relevant, but might come up later. It's a brain dump from the client on everything from the history of the product, where they're at, et cetera. It's then the job of account service or the strategist or the planner to then take that and find an interesting way to communicate that brief. So sometimes that's not always effective, but you get to a really good proposition in a brief that you can kind of use, like I can't call it top of my head, but the right information distilled down to give to the creatives based on some questioning. And then I like to just kind of go far and wide and spend the first part of the process just finding going through your references. I have a whole shitload of websites and places on the internet or going down a YouTube vortex and just start the research. Essentially, go down rabbit holes, go far and wide. The first part of it is not to solve the idea, but to start to find a way into the brief through popular culture, through best-in-class advertising is always a really great way to start. Go and look at the most awarded campaigns from the last however many years, that relevant campaigns in that same, category, product, all that kind of stuff, and just start to just really fill the cup with as much inspiration as possible. And then it's down to starting to refine that into ideas. Usually with words, you start with some lines or some platforms, again, depending on what the idea is, and you start to refine that down to thoughts of ideas, and taking that why, going wide, and building that down and getting quite close to the answer. So that's when the sort of the imagination and fearlessness and curiosity starts to then become more of a concrete process to build whatever that answer is. So shedding it and finding the right stuff and focusing on maybe 2 to 3 ideas, 4 ideas that are worth following and building out and exploring a bit further, and then beginning to pull them together and visualizing them and starting to find references. And that process as well is different for every agency, but often some clients prior to presenting the final work will like to do what they call a tissue session. That's essentially like a bit of a loose sharing of the directions that you've got. And now you can sometimes get a little, you have to have some restraint with that, because clients get very excited, rightly so. They want to see, sometimes I've gone into a tissue session, really that should just be words and some references. And I've had situations where you can very quickly tell by the look on their face that they are incredibly underwhelmed and disappointed with what they've said. Because that's the thing, because the danger is if you show them something too early and you visualize it, they get stuck on that and they think that's, and then you've shown them to me, you've opened the kimono too wide. You need to, or dressing gown or whatever it is that you're wearing at night with nothing underneath. And and then that's usually the process. You have a check-in, get a bit of a gauge, and then you work up to the full presentation. And again, I think restraint is a really good thing, because you go from really a wide place of creative exploration to a refinement of the ideas.
Well, refinement of ideas. What's that speed like, or what's it getting like?
Fast. It's fast, getting faster and faster. Generally, the timings are more demanding, tighter turnarounds. There's always been unfair expectations, but I think just the world that we're living in now, where companies need to get answers to problems faster and get shit out into the world, which is problematic, because sometimes you can get to places quickly, but sometimes it's just not enough time to be able to service that problem with undercooked creative, because you haven't been given time. And that's hard, the refinement of ideas, because you don't always get it. The thing is with the process is it's not a defined process about how quickly. It's not like after day 3 you've got an idea. After day 2, you might not. It is a scary process. I mean, when you're like, fuck it, we're a couple of days out and we're just not. Do we believe in what we've done? Fortunately, I haven't had too many situations like that. It's usually always been one that I think we believe in, and that's really important, that you go into a room and with a client and everyone believes in the work that you've created, and usually you do because you've spent the time. But yeah, the timings are getting tighter on that refinement and presenting of ideas. I've had ridiculous requests from clients going, I want it in days, or do you reckon you could get us something in a week? And you go, well, we've got other work that's working. We've got, we don't have the luxury of just having a team that only works on your brief, because time is money, and we then also have to be careful as a business, as an agency, to not we've got to make money. So on the job, so if you're burning head hours trying to crunch something in a short amount of time, it's not a profitable or feasible way to go about it. So
the evolution and the joys of where we're heading, and we'll adapt. I'm sure it'll adapt. Yeah. It'll just find different ways and faster ways of doing things. Integration of production, something I really enjoy, obviously, because I'm very biased in that area. When do you like to get the production team involved?
As soon as possible, because I'm a big believer of infusing the creative process with as many smart people and experts as you can if you can get them in. So if you've got an idea that needs a production element that you need to check whether it's possible, I'll be more than happy to call a production company that I like, or if I know someone there, and just go, hey, would you mind jumping on a call? I've got a couple of ideas that I like to run you through and get their input, even at that stage. You know what I mean? Like, because then you're getting really good input. You're certainly not going to present something that's not going to be possible, because I know there's nothing worse from a production team when you bring them in too late and you go, oh, here we've got X amount of time to do this crazy thing, and they're like, guys, why did you not? Like, that's not going to take that. It's going to take longer to do that. It's going to be more expensive to do that than you think. So not even just from a feasibility point of view is it great getting the production in as soon as you can, but getting them in right up front and helping the creative process, I like to do. Whether that's, whether that's a tech, whether that's something about a tech thing, or whether that's about how to shoot, what's going to be possible from a, how do we shoot something? How do we bring this to life through a production element? It's best to get, people like yourself in early, if possible.
And when you do bring the producers in, let's just say we're talking, it could be production company, it could be agency side.
Yeah.
Some of the best you've worked with, what is it about them that you like when you do bring them in? What are the standout qualities or the standout ways that they operate or think that really amplify or help your creative team fulfill the idea that they're chasing after?
I think it's a real yes mentality, like a yes, and I'll check it out first kind of thing. Not a nut straight away. That's going to be too hard. It is a real. I think the best producers I've worked with have been really open, but also honest. I think openness and honesty is a really great trait. Because by saying yes means that they're going to give it a crack and come back, and it might be a no, it's too expensive or it's too this, but at least there's been that openness. And then honesty as well, being honest about what's possible and what's not possible. So that's some of the things that are really, I think, really interesting. And also just being a good person, like being a really good person, because you're in the trenches, and it can be shoots can be stressful, as you know. You need to keep the atmosphere and the vibe and the good times as much as possible rolling, and that really does come down to, on the day, the people who you've handed the reins over to for the day. So if they're able to create a really great environment on the day, whether that's whether that's an activation or an ad or whatever it is, that great attitude and just being a good person who that even when things get heated, you can probably still have a bit of a laugh about something and just take a step back and go, shit, at the end of the day, it's just advertising, we're going to be all right, that kind of thing. So I think that's a great attitude, honesty and openness to saying yes to something and exploring.
So what about creatives and that mishmash with creatives and production? Ideally, where would you love to have them? If you're in your agency, where do you want the production team next to creative?
Yeah, I think so, because again, as I said, there is always an ongoing kind of direct relationship with the creative team and their ideas, and I think they can always offer valuable input, agency producers or producers, at all stages of the process. So having them nearby, they can tap someone on the shoulder and be part of that, I think, as well, is where they should is valuable. So having them next to creative.
What about directors? You've worked with them, and you both live in that creative space. What qualities do you think make a standout director who's working in advertising?
I love directors who understand the vision of the creatives and take that and build it and make it like, I love getting treatments being sent through, and the best treatments are the ones where they've seen what the creatives want and blow it up and elevate it and add some really great ideas, but it's a true representation of what we have been working on. Again, being a good person on the shoot.
Yeah.
So having been on the other side of the camera, I've worked with shit directors and good directors, and usually they're good people. They create a great environment, safe, fun, open. It keeps coming back to that, like a really open, judgment-free and interesting and fun environment where possible.
Mate, last one. always like to ask advice for newcomers, creatives that are joining, producers. Let's stick with creatives, Nick, because they're your brethren. What advice have you got for them?
I would say be open to learning from every single person in that agency, be it account service, be it strategy, be it other creatives. I think your job is to just be open and willing to learn from everywhere you can. Every experience that you get, every job, every meeting you go to is a chance to learn from somebody else. And that's not just that's not a thing for someone starting out. I try my best, no matter what, wherever, if it's a new crew, a new something, is to just try and learn and just take on more and build your experience. That would be my biggest tip for young creatives, would be just show up, ready to learn, be ready to collaborate, and be willing to, just absorb, because you just never know when a great thing is going to be put in front of you or another great person. And there is so much to learn every day, always. So just be open, because not everyone is.
Nick Jamieson, like I said at the beginning of this chat, I'm just so grateful that you take the time to actually sit down, impart a bit of knowledge, share your insights, and be willing to open up and give some thought to the world that we're in and the people that are in it. So thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it, buddy. And I'm sure that there's going to be plenty of people that will get a lot from it. So thank you.
Oh, I hope so. Thanks, mate. I hope the waffle is of value to somebody out there listening. So I appreciate it, Brenton. I really do. Thanks for having me on, and keep up the good work.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
Well, that's it for today on Make the Logo Bigger. Thanks for hanging out with us. We've shared some insights and stories that I hope you found useful. Whether you're just getting started or diving deeper into ad production, there's always more to explore. Keep listening, stay curious, and we'll be back soon with some more from the world of production. Take care until then.